Good morning. Thank you for offering to let me speak to you today. It's a pleasure. I always like speaking at Boston University. I'll move the microphone. You have an exciting program. I've known Dr. Katz for several years and seen the work that he and the dean have put together for you. And it really truly is groundbreaking in some ways, and you are really at a point where you have an opportunity to make a difference. What I'm going to talk today a little bit about is some of the trends in social media and mobile technologies. Forgive me, I'm more comfortable speaking somewhere like C-SPAN, so I'm not used to this many people. Whoops, I'm in the wrong down button. And how do we narrow it down to the person so that it really becomes useful? One of the other thing is that we've seen the digital delivery of news media to the individual grow. Now, 62% of people say that they get their news from their digital source, mostly their phone. Your dean several years ago had a speech, and he was talking about the decline of print media and the fact that there was no viable platform that was profitable to deliver information. And all of a sudden you had these citizen journalists out there who were not trained, providing misinformation or bad information, and people are taking this. But that's changed now that you have that portable, untethered platform in your hand, and you can take and make a profit off it delivering news and information. The quality is getting much better. I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. We also see that smartphone use, or your tablet or your smartphone, people are just turning to these to take and do things in their daily life. In the financial industry, we've seen an incredible growth in the people who are just using their smartphone and their apps to take and manage their financial services. And this is even growing greater. I work at Bank of America, and last month we've seen, just at our company, and this is industry-wide, our 20 millionth mobile user sign up for online banking through their mobile phone. And most of our development is in that area. So it's huge. But it's also causing businesses to deal with what's called digital disruption. 62% of companies, according to KPMG, have seen this and are experiencing this and are trying to deal with it. The old ways, or the traditional ways of dealing with development and technology, are really being changed dramatically because of the fact that people now have this powerful tool in their hand and are able to do it. And also, because of that instant gratification, or the ability to do this anytime, anywhere, when I want it, the consumer expectations have shifted. And there's much more of a demand now to take and provide those self-service functions or those functions in a digital format. So I'm going to give you a couple examples, and these are pretty much obvious to you. To my generation, sometimes they're not as obvious, but dealing with this. Uber used to be a ride service. I need a ride. But think about what transacts inside that Uber car. You're with a friend, you say, oh, hey, you want to split it? And there wasn't a way to do it, so what did Uber do? They put a fare splitting component in. You're taking and you're meeting a friend. What you used to do, you used to call them up on the phone and say, hey, we're about 20 minutes away. Then you call them up, I'm about 10 minutes away. Oh, now we're 20 minutes away with traffic. Uber built right into that now through social media, that it will automatically notify the party you're meeting of your estimated time of arrival and make a change. When you look at OpenTable, you used to be able to make a dinner reservation. Now, they've taken it into a different level, integrating different vendors and sources in. So when you're done with your meal, instead of taking it for the wait person to come over and give you the check, and then you look at it, you give them your credit card, they go back, they run their credit card, comes, they sign it, you put the tip, they go back, and they bring it out, and you leave. You can go right into the OpenTable app, look at the bill, push a button for the percentage gratuity you want, and pay with Apple Pay without even having that person transact. So look at how many steps and how many people you've taken out of that, in a sense, some time out of that. So you've socialized the bill payment process, and people are thinking about these. Even at Bank of America, you used to say, oh, I'm going to take and pay a bill or transfer some money between accounts. And when you had a problem, what did you do? Well, you found the 800 number, you called them, put in your account number, then you went through menu 1, I want this, menu 2, I want this, 7 menus later, you finally get to someone and they ask you, what problem are you having? You have to re-explain it. Very time consuming, very frustrating. Now, built right into the mobile app is, I'm having a problem, it knows what screen you're on, you push a button, it automatically connects you to the contact center to a person who is now seeing what's on your screen and has your information, so you've now eliminated that long drawn-in piece. So it's integrated various sources, providers, vendors, APIs, and components to take and make life a lot easier for you. So that's what's driving the industry. People want it now. I want it easy, and I want I want it to be available to me 24/7 when I need it. So the pressure's on. Traditionally, for years, development was a very linear process, and it was sometimes a time-consuming process, and it still will be for some number of applications. So you get a bunch of people together and say, here's what we want to do. Let's get a design. Let's approve it. Let's size it out. Let's take and do the development cycle. Let's test it. Let's build the servers, et cetera, et cetera. And that could take months to years to take and deliver. And you also knew the expectation at the end. This is what it's going to look like. This is how it's going to function. This is what's going to do. With the digital marketplace now out there and people wanting things, we have to learn to be adaptive. And technology is changing dramatically. So instead of that linear perspective, you've got now this whole sphere around you. And as Apple Pay becomes available to OpenTable, or Uber becomes available to your contacts and text messaging, I mean, everybody's starting to integrate things. So people are now changing their expectations, expecting more and more, and they're willing to take and switch providers. There's less loyalty. If one bank's offering something that's really good for them and it makes life more convenient, and they offer you $100 to switch, take the $100 and switch. So there's a lot of incentive out there to take and keep current in the marketplace. And in the past, we had a PC, plugged into our modem or our cable modem. Now we have this device in our hand, so people have much easier access to manage their data. The grand vision of what it's going to look like for companies who are providing services has changed because we don't know what it is. It's being disrupted all the time. And as we take and look at the development cycle, it's now happening every 4 weeks, 6 weeks instead of every year, and it's in much smaller chunks. And it's usually to address either a marketplace item, a function or feature that people asked for, a regulatory item, or a fix. So instead of these grand releases we have every once a year, we're now having them every 4 to 6 weeks. If you look on your iPhone and you look at the number of updates you get just for like Facebook and all the others, they're constantly releasing. And what's happening is you have multiple teams now working on the same application but in different chunks. And it's much more difficult because we have to worry about this continuous delivery process. And if what I'm changing is it going to affect what the next group or the following group is changing, who's working at the same time on things that we have. So it's just causing a rethinking of how we take and design what we're looking to expect in the end, and also how we have to change technology and infrastructure. Data center virtualization has been an enabler of this. I won't get into the details, but also the continuous delivery cycles that had to adapt to it, so that way you can constantly change code on the servers and pause it, change it, and make sure it works. The testing of that alone is really dramatic. So instead of these large IT organizations with a large team focused on one thing with an end product, now you have that same large IT organization or technology organization with smaller groups of people working, in a sense, independently to deliver a component, but still having to work together as a team to make sure it works and it doesn't fail. Because if it doesn't work, people are going to say, this is not good, and they'll possibly look elsewhere. So there's a couple things that really need to be considered, in my opinion, this is my humble opinion, is this privacy and security. And when we're looking at the Internet of Things, which everybody knows is coming about, it offers us a tremendous opportunity to simplify our lives, but it also takes and creates a tremendous amount of data that is staggering. One of the things I like to talk about, a single Boeing 787 flight produces 0.5 terabyte of data that is sent back to the airline and Boeing on each flight. 0.5 terabyte of data. So if you think how many 787 flights there are a day and how much information is being collected and over a period of time, staggering. When you think about what's being collected about us, I have a Nest thermometer in my house. I love my Nest thermometer. But it also knows when I'm home and I'm not home. So it's collecting data about my patterns. And if you think about it, if you're saying, I'm thinking of opening a business in this neighborhood, when are people home? If they had access to that Nest data, they can take and say, oh, here's a customer of ours, let me look at their home patterns. I mean, if you think about what's available out there and how it can be used, but the question is, how much of that do you want to share? You walk into Walmart, you have your phone in your pocket, you're standing in front of the television sets. Walmart knows you're there and it picks up your phone, you're standing there 7 minutes and it says, hey, they must be thinking of televisions. When you get home, all of a sudden you got all these targeted ads for televisions at Walmart, or they notify you when it's on sale. Well, when they notify you on sale, is that a good thing, or is, hey, get out of my laundry, I don't want you checking these things. So we really have to, when we look at this, is it a benefit or an intrusion? And we also really need to take and look at ways to allow the person or the consumer to take and make the choice of how much information do they want to share and how much information don't they want to share. Does it benefit them, or is it something like, get out of my laundry? A friend of mine won't even use one of those scan cards in the supermarket because he doesn't want them to know he's buying, Fruity Pebbles or something like that. He thinks it's an invasion of privacy. Well, I walk the supermarket and I have the little hand scanner, and it says, oh, you haven't bought ketchup in 3 weeks, you need ketchup, don't forget to buy ketchup on, row in aisle 4. So, is it convenience or not? So you really have to look at what value does it provide, does the consumer really want it, and do you put some sort of control into their hand? One of the things about social media voting in Europe, here at the School of Communication, and it turns out that people who actually vote online and get their information online participate less than people who actually go and vote. People like standing in line, they like hearing the conversation. And I brought up one of the concerns is, and this is my pet peeve, I hate the comments section of things that you read. I mean, you read the comments and like, where are these whack jobs coming from? And when you're online and you allow a free and open conversation, if they're anonymous, they can say anything. If they're kind of identified by a screen name, well, it's getting a little bit more of the person, but when you look at the conversation, do you really need to know who you're talking to or who's speaking to you to deliver information? So what degree of anonymity, oh, that's a tough one, anonymity, okay, I pronounced it wrong now. I haven't had much coffee yet. So how much do you really know who you're talking to and what information they're providing to you? Now, I'll talk a little bit about the Chinese in a couple minutes about how they direct what information you get. But also, if you look at whatever you post on Facebook or whatever you like or whatever sites you go, you're building an online profile, and those service providers are sending you information they think you need. It's not necessarily your choice. So there's kind of like, I don't want to call it a little brainwashing going on, or it's giving you selective information that may not be a complete picture that is of value to you. So we really have to take this into consideration. Your dean also talked several years ago about, I said, the demise of newspapers, print media, magazines, and the laying off of reporters, and that there was no viable delivery method until recently where it's profitable to deliver news and content and opinion with people who are professional journalists. And that we were getting all sorts of crazies putting things out there, and people were believing them. So there's a big gap in trust right now out there. How do you reestablish that trust? Whatever you're doing, whether it's business or news or the like. Growing up, Walter Cronkite, CBS News, he was America's most trusted individual. When you watched him on the news, you were getting a fair story, you were getting the news, and very rarely ever without opinion and comment. The only time he showed emotion that I can remember is in 1963 when President Kennedy was shot, and he announced to the nation that he died, and he had a tear in his eye. And then in July 1969, when he announced to the nation, man just walked on the moon, and he had a tear of joy in his eye. And that's the only time we've seen emotion. Watch any news station, watch anything today, and emotion is riddled throughout everybody's comments. So, for the past 10 years, I've been living part-time 3 or 4 months a year in China, commuting back and forth. It's good for frequent flyer miles. And China is kind of the story of what we are, but with the government doing it rather than businesses do it. And they have many users, but many restrictions. And I'm going to go briefly through some of these so we can have some time for question and answer. So the Chinese government doesn't want people to share. They want to control the conversation. And what they did is the Great Firewall of China. It's called the Golden Shield Project. And they set up all these agencies to monitor what goes on the internet and with communication and social media, to make sure that the conversation doesn't lead in a direction that they don't want. If you look at Tiananmen Square, even more recently in Hong Kong, where protesters were, they just shut down cell phone use because people were texting each other and sending things. Didn't prevent them in Hong Kong from communicating, because they found another outlet. There's an app that you can communicate using a Bluetooth network, so they created a Bluetooth network. Last year at this conference, one of the graduate students presented a paper about how in Turkey they tried to suppress social media during the uprisings, and he had all sorts of facts and figures. It was a great paper. But whatever they shut down, within 24 hours, another avenue opened up. They shut it down, another 24 hours, the avenue opened up. So I consider what the Chinese do and what all these governments or people are trying to do to shut down that conversation is like having a grass shack with a steel door. You know, they think that steel door is going to prevent people from getting through, but man, there's just so many ways around. When I worked in China, and we go over to China, and the Chinese know this too, if you want a whole process, every so often your VPN stops working because the Chinese found the IP address, and then you just go, give me the new one, and it works. So, I'm going to say the 10 things, I usually see an article on this, that you won't find in China are blocked. Several years ago at Boston University here, there were two students who were very strong supporters of the athletic department. And they had their own website. But they would come to all the games. One was dressed in a hot dog outfit, and the other one was dressed as Jesus, and they were known as Hot Dog and Jesus. And they were great students, great supporters, and they had a blog called the Hot Dog and Jesus website. So when I was in China, I was trying to get to it, it was blocked, and I came back and I said, you know, your website's blocked in China. Well, that was the greatest thing they ever heard. That they were blocked in China as their website. So, you know, it's really taking a look at that. Snapchat, so also blocked, but there's also a recent Harvard study estimated that as many as 488 million social media posts are fabricated by the Chinese government every year. They have a whole bunch of people just monitoring social media, either you know, disavowing what somebody else is saying or spreading the government message. So a lot of misinformation, mistruth, and some diatribes. It's like they have 1,000 Donald J. Trumps tweeting away over there in China about China. And also they restrict films. They only allow 34 foreign films a year there. They have a huge film industry themselves, with some famous American and Chinese names who are participating. And also they block a lot of books. They only allow a certain number in. The Chinese love gambling, and they block online gambling, but VPN, they wind up doing it. Also ebooks and videos. Apple iBooks and iTunes Movies, along with Disney's video screening, have been blocked, so you can't get them there in China if you were just a standard Chinese user, whether on your website or on your phone. But get your VPN going, you can watch that. I mean, we want to watch Netflix, you have to turn on VPN. If you want to watch like ABC.com, you need to turn on the VPN. They just is Alibaba. I think everybody's heard that. They're into online movies. They bought what would be the Chinese YouTube. They're like the Chinese Amazon for shopping, and they also do personal finance, person-to-person loans. They're challenging the traditional banks, the traditional financial institutions in China. All of those major banks are owned by the government, so it's really challenging the government. They've been very slow to change because they don't really have an incentive. It's not as a competitive market because the bank owns all the big banks. So they can dictate that change of pace, or the pace of change. Now with a lot of these web-based services coming out, it's now challenging that tradition, and the banks are now rethinking, the government's rethinking, you know, like how do you do things, or do we restrict these people from doing things because it's really challenging the way that the government wants it done. Another is Tencent, and we use WeChat all the time over in China. They're a challenger to a lot of the personal messaging services and online gaming. One of the things in China for years, whenever we needed to communicate with one of our Chinese partners, they'd use about 80% text messaging, 20% email. So if you sent them an email, they very rarely saw it. Plus they had no real access outside of the office, untethered, because they weren't doing remote access and didn't have that available to them. So text messaging was a very easy way to do it because they can do it on their phone and they didn't have to worry about the restrictions or being able to dial in or get their mail. The government is now cracking down on that and saying that business communications need to be much more secure. So now they're looking at alternatives, but WeChat was the way that everybody talked. Talk for personal, talk for business. They did not have that same set of remote capability tools or access that we had and normally expect with our jobs. Baidu is the search engine in China. Google's blocked, Bing is blocked, you need a VPN. Well, they do have Google in China, but if you Google something in China, you get the worst results and you get what the Chinese want you to see. So you need to turn on the VPN if you really want to get anything good. And the same thing with Bing. Also, Baidu is very recently into online maps, self-driving. They're a big competitor, and they're doing a big push in this. One of the things that the Chinese government has done in the last several years is heavily invest in innovation. I mean, they have one of the larger percentage of innovation budgets to encourage people to provide products and services that are going to make them much more competitive globally as a government than mostly anybody else, if probably not as much as anybody else. And the last is Huawei, and I always pronounce this wrong. They laugh at me in China. I've been there 11 years. I can never pronounce their company name, but everybody knows when I say it which company it is. If you haven't seen a Huawei mobile phone yet in the United States, you'll probably see one in the near future. In China, it is really outselling, in some cases, the Apple iPhone and the Samsung phones because of its price point and its capability. Again, the Chinese are very innovative about creativity, is the ability to hide your source. So the Huawei phones have a lot of the same functionality that we see in the popular Western brands. The price point and their capabilities make them very attractive, not only in China, but sub-China, Latin America, and Africa. And if you really tie that to Huawei being a network provider, Cisco is our major network provider, mostly globally. The networks between telecommunication companies within banks and the like. Huawei has been a huge competitor of theirs. And if you look at the telecom markets in sub-Asia, especially Latin America and Africa, they are offering communications equipment that normally would have been a Western brand like Cisco at a much lower price point, going in and in some cases giving it free as an incentive so that they can build later on. So, and providing that technology in the connectivity in these third world markets or the emerging markets that the price point for Western communication equipment can't even meet, and frankly offers too much sophisticated capability that necessarily those countries don't need. So in the next couple of years, or if you travel outside the United States, this is one brand that you're going to definitely see everywhere. So in summary, what we wanted to do, what my point of view is that everything should have a purpose. What was it? 190 million, whatever the number of apps were on the iTunes store, 1.9 million. They don't all have a purpose that you need. It really is provide something that provides value to people, that makes their life simpler. If you look at, as we pointed out, at Uber and OpenTable and Bank of America, what they do, it really simplifies your life. It does some of the menial tasks and saves you time and frustration, and that has a value. And by making it easy to use, people adapt it quickly and really take and stay with you as far as brand loyalty. But those two components really are upsetting the way you have to deliver to the consumer. It's no longer the long-range thinking and the long-range delivery. It is being able to turn on a dime, and if something comes out that is highly competitive, or somebody offers a service that allows you to API or program interface into them, such as Apple Pay and some of their capabilities, does it have value, and do we want to do it? So you're also constantly adapting to the marketplace. But the one area of concern I'm going to go back to is respect privacy. When you're looking at this, yeah, it's great, but does it really allow the consumer to have that choice to take and say, I want to participate in whole, I want to participate in part, or I don't want to participate at all? And also, if I'm dealing with someone, do I know who I'm really dealing with, and is it a trusted person, and is it somebody I want to take and engage? So that's my quick comments today. I think we have time for questions.
Things to the consumer, make things more accessible. How do you think that this new technology is affecting company culture? Are people embracing it? Are people more reluctant because it's maybe replacing their jobs or threatening, threatening their jobs? So how do you think that this technology is impacting company cultures, like in
So
sales?
the question was, how do I think this technology is impacting company culture? At my company, the switch to a virtualized platform, the switch to agile development, which allows in the workplace. As you look at younger people who are entering the workforce, and as they're coming in, and they're used to dealing in a mobile platform, they're used to that instant satisfaction, they're used to that way of communicating or interacting with other people, at our company, we're introducing much more of those social tools in that collaborative environment. And we will be improving upon that, because in order to entice people to come work for you, you want to take and provide a platform, or you want to provide the tools that they're used to working with. Back and date myself, in high school, you learned to type on an IBM Selectric, and IBM gave all the IBM typewriters to the schools for free, so when, especially young girls, being sexist then, we wanted to get a secretarial job, and they went in and they said, I want to work on an IBM Selectric. And they didn't want to work on any other typewriter, and that's how they got the marketplace. We as a business, or somebody as a business looking at who's my workforce, I have to look at how do they work, how do they interact, how do they engage, and I have to make sure that I provide some of that capability in the tools that we offer them, and also introduce them in such a way that the people who are their legacy are able to also take and get used to using them and learn to participate in that same manner. So there's a huge cultural change for the legacy people. There's a huge cultural change that's forcing a technology change, and that needs to be managed. Dr. Katz.
Well, thank you for the highly illuminating presentation. I was quite fascinated about the problem of dealing with apps, but I think even beyond that is the fundamental question about China and its control of social media by the government. It was expected in many quarters when the internet first began proliferating that it would be a way for ordinary people to express themselves in opposition to whatever authorities ruled the country. However, in China, it's unclear whether the force of the governmental leadership over the people has led to even more restrictions on people's ability to mobilize against the government, and perhaps galvanized or motivated people who support the government to be able to express their views. So I wondered if you could look in a crystal ball towards the future, how do you think the continued proliferation of social media in China will affect the ability of citizens to express views in opposition to, or even create powers that compete with the government?
I've been working in China since 1999. My first trip there, I was in Shenzhen, and if you wanted to go out to where our plant was, as a foreigner, I can go with my passport, but if you were Chinese, you had to have a permit to leave town, and you went through these toll booths. It was highly restricted. Over the last 16, 17 years, there's been a huge change in China, and one of the things I respect most about China is that they moved hundreds of millions of people into a very comfortable middle-class society. Same cars, same type of condos, same sort of appliances that we have, so their lifestyle has become very Western. We've also seen a growth in dialogue and freedom of conversation, not as much as you would hope, but it's getting there. But the fact that the government still takes and monitors things, will shut things down, will take and put false information out there, it's still in place. And it's probably going to take, in my opinion, a while to change, maybe another 5 or 6 years. The government recognizes this, and I think that they're building it into their plans. The Communist Party in China has what's known as a 5-year plan. And I think they're on their 11th or 12th 5-year plan since communism was found. So they meet, they decide, here's our linear plan for the next 5 years, here's what we're going to do, and everybody falls in line and everybody does it. The availability in the changing technology landscape has been addressed, but I think that in the next 5-year plan, you'll probably see some easing of restrictions and much more of more open dialogue, but it won't get to necessarily the point of Western countries for a while. You know, they're doing what Facebook does, but at a government level. You know, like Facebook says, here's what it is, here's the news stories I want to see, here's friends I suggest. You know, the Chinese are kind of controlling the social conversation that way, but the restrictions will be looser as it's much harder to control. Go back to that, you know, steel door on the grass shack, and you put something up, they're going to find a way around it, and at some point you really can't control it. So how do you deal with it in a realistic manner? And I think that the government will probably look at ways to do that.
Concerns in China is, of course, that various factions will break up the country. It's a vast country with many competing groups, and one reason that the government wants to exercise such control is to prevent the collapse of the country in civil war, which has plagued the country for thousands of years, actually. So isn't there a fear that if they follow what you anticipate, that the entire country will break up, much the way there's a threat to break up the European Union this very day?
I think it goes back to, again, them coming funded. I think that their exercise in that area, in a very targeted and well thought out plan, will help control some of that conversation, that it may actually give the illusion that there's much more of a free and open dialogue, but they have so many components in place, from people to money to the infrastructure, that they will be able to exercise some sort of control, and should it start getting out of hand, you know, I have no doubt that, you know, shut it down. But it's a reality that they have to deal with, and it's just like businesses are being disrupted, their government's being disrupted, and their government is a business. So how do you deal with it? And what's the best way, and what do we do to manage expectations, manage the conversation, manage the content?